Now, in considering what a baby is going to be eating, one of the biggest factors we have to start looking at is what exactly the mother has to buy when she goes to the store. And really, it's quite a big decision to make when she does get into that marketplace and has to decide on what exactly she's going to buy. So maybe this display that we've arranged will help a few people when you're going out shopping and give you a little bit more idea of what exactly you're buying when you are getting the baby food. Now, one of the basic rules, I think, a rule of thumb that you could follow when you're going to the grocery store is just the idea that you're buying simple, plain food. That's all that the baby at this point really needs. Until he's a year old, he only needs plain, simple food, okay? So a lot of the combinations that are available on the market are just not necessary for you and your baby. So it's something that you should consider very closely when you're looking at your labels and buying your food, just that the baby doesn't need any complicated mixtures. He needs plain, basic food, okay? Now, perhaps around 3 to 4 months, which is the recommended time, you're going to be starting introduction of solids or cereals, perhaps. Now, maybe we can take a little bit of a closer look at cereals and labels that you're going to have available in the stores. Now, the first least allergenic one that you'd like to introduce for the baby, or is usually recommended for introduction, is going to be the cereal, or the rice cereal itself, okay? Now, perhaps if that's not available, or if you'd like to try something a little different for the baby, and for the least cost, you can advance from there into the oatmeal cereals. Now, in some cases, again, neither may be available in the stores that you're shopping at, so perhaps you could try the barley cereals. Okay, now all of these are much more reasonably priced than what you're going to pay for any additions or for the mixed cereals themselves. And an example of the mixed cereal is just called just that, mixed cereal. Okay? Now, when you're going to the store, you're probably going to run into the combination factors that are available in the different variety of cereals. For example, we've got 2 of them here that you can take a look at. There's the mixed cereal with the fruit and the rice cereal with honey. Now, in pricing these ourselves, we found that there's over 20 cents difference between boxes themselves. I mean, they're 20 cents higher priced for the additions in the food. Now, for your baby and your baby's health, it's completely unnecessary to have that added in and paying the extra 20 cents for. So in that sense, if you prefer to have some some fruit added to your baby's cereal, add it yourself. It's very, very simple to add a banana to the cereal that's already prepared for your baby. All right, now perhaps that does give a little bit more basic idea on our cereal buying. Now, perhaps a little later on, your baby at this stage is probably going through 4 or 5 months time period, or he should be about 4 to 5 months of age now, and you're probably going to think about introducing vegetables. Well, again, the choice is going to be completely your own, but you do have a big choice to make. The problem comes in when there are a variety of things available. Now, once more, all I can say is that you try and buy very simple, plain vegetables, okay? We have 2 examples here that you can take a look at. There's the peas, which is just the simple peas by itself, and the carrots, pureed carrots. Now, neither of which have to have sugar added or salt added, because Ball prepared baby foods have these already added in, and the mother has absolutely no need to add that to her cereal or to any of the food she's feeding the baby. Now, let's move on a little further. The baby probably will be about 5 months old when you're going to try introducing some fruit. Now, this brings up another field totally separate from any of the ones we've discussed thus far, because fruit themselves are often used as desserts in the baby's diet. Now, it creates a lot of problems when we think of it that way, because a mother begins to think that the baby should have something extra special made out of the fruit. And in that case, it means a lot more sugar added to the foods used for the extra dessert. For example, if you can stick to the plain fruit as far as desserts go for the baby, it's all that is absolutely necessary. He needs nothing more than that. For example, plain apricots, or plain pears, or, a combination of strained bananas. You can use a lot of plain, simple fruit themselves, by themselves as the dessert for your baby's meal, okay? Now, also, when we were out in the stores, we found a lot of different combinations, and it might do to give you some examples of what is available and what really shouldn't and could not be used as well with your baby because of the extra sugar that's added in. For example, in place of the apricots, some of the producers have put apricot supreme on the market, which, if you look at the label, is full, and it has a very, very high amount of sugar added back to it, okay? And again, in relation to the pears that I mentioned, there's plain strained pears right here, but also available is pear dessert. Now, in choosing your 2 desserts, it's much preferable to keep to the plain, simple fruit by itself, both the apricots and the pears, rather than start getting into these extra sugar products. One point we should like to bring up, or we would like to bring up, is the fact that both of these prepared desserts, made of the fruit itself, has not only added sugar in it, but also the added egg yolk, which too early can really create problems in the baby system by perhaps causing an allergy to eggs and egg yolks. So it might be something to start considering when you are choosing your fruit as a dessert in the baby's diet. Okay? I have a couple of other examples here that you might be able to look at as well. Things that do have both the yolk and the sugar added into them and that are available in many of the stores. Once more, there's the Strawberry Delight and the Peach Pie, both of which are much different from the plain, ordinary fruit. The point about the peach pie in particular is that it's actually made with the crusts added to the whole mixture, so that the caloric content is much, much higher, and really it's not suited for babies at all. It could be much better used for someone who's a little older and can't handle solid food as much, but for the baby itself, it's totally wrong. Okay? Now, one thing I should mention too at this point is the idea that if a lot of these simple, plain fruits and vegetables and meats are not available in the stores where you're shopping, it's a concern that you could perhaps voice to the store manager or perhaps someone else who's in charge of buying and stocking for the store. It is something that they perhaps might like to hear and might be able to take some action on if you ask them to buy more of the simple, plain fruits and vegetables and meats. They can make them available in most cases, and they probably will if you will ask for it more often. Okay? Now perhaps at this point we can go a little bit more fully into the types of meats that are available, meats and poultry that are available on the market, because around 6 months your baby will apt to be needing and wanting a little bit more meat put into his diet. Now, in a lot of cases around the province, particularly the smaller, more isolated areas, you're going to run into the problem where they, again, aren't available as plain meats, strained meats themselves. Often you're going to find available the meat dinners and the meat and vegetable combinations. Now, in that sense, it's much better if you can get the plain meat by itself as that. Okay, we have samples of them available here that you can take a look at. There's the strained beef and the strained chicken with the broth. That gives you some idea of what types of labels to look for when you're out shopping. Now, again, the cost is a little less. Sometimes it's on par, but it's much preferable for the nutrition to get that higher content of meat coming in than what you do have available from both the chicken with vegetables and with the dinners. We have a chicken dinner here, a strained meat dinner, and the chicken with vegetables, both of which are lower in quantity as far as their protein goes, and therefore are not giving you the full value for the money that you're spending. Another thing I'd like to probably bring up now is the idea of having junior foods available in the stores. Now, junior foods are usually classified as foods with a little bit more texture so that your baby can learn to get used to that texture. Now, again, I feel perhaps they're putting out a little bit more money for what you really can do yourselves or can eliminate the cost for. Okay? We have samples of here is the junior meat dinner with chicken and vegetables, and the junior alphabet beef dinner. Now, okay, both of those are cases where the texture is changed, but other than that, the content is very similar to both of these two here. Okay? So it's much preferable if you can once more stick to the plain, strained meats themselves. Now, perhaps, too, we can mention just briefly and very quickly a little bit more about desserts that we haven't covered previous to this. Now, on the markets, more than likely, you're going to find in the shelves that they have custards very available and very commonly seen in the stores. Now, many mothers do think that the custard itself is a substitute for fruits because it can be used as a dessert. But I think everyone is wrong in that concept and really, really should not buy custard for their babies as a dessert too early. Custard itself is made from eggs and fresh milk and should never be used too early in the baby's diet as a dessert substitute. And we've got a can of the custard here that perhaps you might take a look at. Right over here. Now that gives you some sort of idea what it looks like on the shelves, and really it's much preferable that you try the plain fruit in place of the custard for a dessert substitute. Okay? Now, the last point we'd like to bring up, I think, about feeding your baby and choosing a lot of the different foods available is looking a little bit more fully at juices. Now, there's quite a variety available on the market, especially for babies. And, it is something that I think most mothers bring in a little earlier than usual. It's not really completely necessary until about 5 months. But if you prefer to bring it in, it's something that a baby learns to like as far as taste difference goes in their fluids coming in. Now, on the market, We have available 2 different types that we were able to run across in the supermarkets, and perhaps you'll have a different type of variety available. Pineapple juice besides this. You might have, a number of other types of things that are available. But I think perhaps that the mother is paying a premium price for the strained orange juices and the baby juices themselves, mainly because all it is diluted juice. Now, I think possibly a good basic to go on when you're buying is to perhaps use your regular juice that you have available. And I'm talking about juice. I'm not talking about crystallized juice crystals, okay, or fruit juice crystals as far as that goes. I'm talking about good basic juice itself. In dilution, you could, dilute very, very strongly, but you can get the same consistency and pay an awful lot less by using the plain regular juice itself and adding your own boiled water. Okay? Now, I might emphasize at this point, or bring it up in case a lot of women really are concerned about it, the idea of using the fruit crystals in place of this juice itself. Now, I might emphasize that it could never, never, never be a replacement for juice, just because it's never called a juice. It's a flavor crystal, and it has much more sugar in it, and it's only got added vitamin C to it, so it really could never act as a juice substitute. So as far as babies go, and really adults in themselves, I don't feel Tang really has a very strong role to play as far as a juice substitute goes. So mums, if you're looking for something as far as juice goes, try the regular type of ones that are canned or frozen, or the ones that are already in bottles.
Earlier on in the program, we did have a section on buying baby food from the store, but many of you already know from programs that you've seen, probably a lot of you have seen Marketplace and other similar programs, and you realize that it's quite possible to make your own baby foods at home and save yourself a lot of money if you're doing so. Of course, if you really talk to your grandmother or even your mother and find out how they fed their babies, you'll find that, in fact, there weren't any prepared baby foods on the market at all then, so they did have to prepare their own baby foods. Now, what I'm going to do here today is just a very brief demonstration to show you how you can, as well, make your own baby foods and save yourself some money. Now, what I have here in front of me is a blender. I realize that some of you at home won't have a blender, but for those of you who do have one, you'll be familiar with it and how you can use it to prepare a lot of different foods. And a blender is very versatile in preparing your own baby food. It isn't essential, first of all, let me say that it isn't essential to have a blender. You could use a sieve, and again, to repeat myself, if you ask your mothers or your grandparents how they prepared their baby food, you'll find quite often they did use sieves or mashed very finely. So you can prepare your own baby foods without a blender, but a blender is very helpful. And as I said, you will save yourself some money. In fact, I think if you were to prepare your own baby foods for a period of about 3 months approximately, by that time you should have paid for your blender. Now, the first food that you probably would give your baby that would require your own home preparation would be vegetables. And we strongly recommend giving vegetables before fruit because of the fact that the fruits tend to be sweet. So first of all, I'm going to prepare vegetables today to show you how quickly it can be done. I'm using peas, since this is one of our most familiar vegetables here in Newfoundland. These are canned peas, which is more available in communities sometimes than frozen peas. If you have a choice, I think I would choose to use the frozen peas rather than canned. However, today I'm using canned because I know they're more available for you. These are just regular canned peas I have here. I'm just going to pour them into the blender. You can see that I'm using a 14-ounce can, so I put them all in at the same time. And you'll realize that this is more than enough for one serving, but I'll show you after what we can do with these. Now, this is the liquid from the canned peas. Please, when you open your can of peas, save this liquid. Don't drain it off into the sink. A lot of the vitamins are there, and so just put your peas in and put this liquid in on top of it. These peas are cooked. They have been cooked in the can, so there's no need to cook them again. Okay, so you have your peas in the blender. Put your cover on, or otherwise you're likely to have quite a mess. And then depending on the consistency that you want, as your child gets older, you won't want them blended quite as finely, so you wouldn't do it quite as long. But it really just requires a few seconds. Now, if you can see the consistency of this, it really is quite fine. Okay, now here we have enough for quite a number of servings of baby food. If you were having peas at supper time, you could just take enough for a serving, maybe approximately a quarter of a cup from your own peas that you were having for supper, and do a little bit for the baby. If you want to prepare the baby's food separately, and I would recommend not adding salt to your baby food, then you can prepare a whole can of peas as I've done here today, and then it's just a matter of making use of an ice cube tray to freeze the vegetables. Now I just have an ordinary ice cube tray here. You can puree your peas as I've done, and then you can just pour your peas into the individual compartments of the ice cube tray. Now I'll just do a sample to show you here. Okay, so when the baby is quite young, you can see that you require small servings of your vegetable, and then you can put them into the ice cube tray and freeze them. And then as you need a serving of vegetable for the baby, it's just a matter of taking one individual cube of the vegetables, and your vegetables are ready if you thaw them out to room temperature. So that would be the method of preparing vegetables at home for the baby. Now you can see that I didn't have to cook the canned vegetable because it's already cooked. If I was using a vegetable that needed cooking, for example, wax beans or green beans or carrots, then you would have to cook the vegetable beforehand. So it would be just a matter of cooking your carrot, and don't add salt to it, as I said earlier, and then put your carrots in the blender with the cooking water, and then pour it out into your tray for freezing. The second kind of food that would be recommended to introduce to your baby's diet would be fruit. And again, it isn't necessary to buy the prepared baby foods. It's very simple to prepare your own fruit at home. Now, I have canned peaches here today, which I'm going to prepare for you. I would recommend fresh fruit as often as possible when you can find it, but I realize that it's very difficult sometimes to get fresh fruits, a variety of fresh fruit in our stores in some parts of Newfoundland. You can, of course, just mash your own banana. It's fine enough. You can just mash it. You can make applesauce very easily by cooking the apples, and without the sugar added, of course, cooking the apples, and you can make applesauce very quickly yourself. But when you're looking for more variety of vegetables, you're going to have to resort to canned vegetables here. Of course, when you can get the fresh ones, do. But when you're using canned, you can see I've separated the fruit from the juice. Now this juice is very sweet. In fact, it's about 35% syrup solution. It has a lot of extra sugar there, which the baby really doesn't need. So in contrast to the vegetables, this time drain off the syrup, and don't use it when you're pureeing the baby's fruit. So what you can do is drain the syrup off, then just take the plain fruit, add it to your blender again, and you can see you still have a small bit of syrup left there. Put your fruit in, and then just add a small amount of plain boiled water. The water should still be boiled, I think, in many areas of the province. So you can just add some plain boiled water to the blender, cover it again, and blend. Here again you can see you can get the consistency which you desire depending on the amount of liquid that you add and depending on the age of your child. As your child gets older, you will make the consistency a little less fine, similar to the junior type foods which are available. Again, just add the mixture to the ice cube tray. And you can see that you have your baby food prepared. You can put it into the tray, and it's pureed. You can freeze it in the tray, and it's ready when the baby wants a serving. The third kind of food that you're going to introduce to your baby's diet, possibly around the age of 6 to 7 months approximately, will be meat. And meat, as we outlined in purchasing baby food, is the most expensive kind of food to buy for your baby. We were recommending that you purchase plain meat as much as possible, and this is fairly expensive. But again, it's very easy with a blender to prepare your own. Now, I have some chunks of roast beef here. You'd have this at home if you'd had a roast, or you might have pieces of chicken. And it's just a matter of cutting it into cubes. Of course, take as much of the fat off as possible because the baby doesn't need the extra fat. With chicken, if you were using chicken or turkey, take off the skin because a lot of the fat is around there, and of course you certainly would pick out the bones as well. Cut your meat into small cubes. If you have cooked your meat at home, it must be cooked, of course. Don't add extra salt to it. Again, the baby doesn't need the extra salt. So you have your cubes of meat. Again, just put them into the blender. Now, the meat, you can realize, is going to take a little longer to blenderize than the fruits and vegetables have taken. Again, because the meat is fairly dry, you will need to add a small amount of liquid to your meat. And again, you can use just boiled water. And we'll just put the cover on again and turn it. Now usually with the meat, because it is a little harder, you see already it's quite fine, and the consistency of it now would be quite adequate for a child over a year, but it still is not quite fine enough for a child under the age of 1 year. So and I think I'll add just a little extra water to it. And sometimes with a blender you have to scrape your food down from the side in order to get it down around the blades. Extra water. Okay, now this is almost fine enough for the baby, but I would like to see it just a little finer for the youngest. You can see the consistency of this. It's still a little bit stringy. This would be quite adequate for a child in the age range of 6 to 8 to 9 months, and meat really shouldn't be introduced to the diet before that. So again, you can just take the meat. The water in the meat will tend to separate somewhat. You can put it into your trays. So you can see that you have your meat pureed, you have your vegetables, and you have your fruit. Now if you were doing a lot, you'd have a whole tray of each. Then you have your baby foods ready for the week. I don't think it's a good idea to freeze more than a week at a time, because you do get some nutrient loss by freezing food, so it's a good idea just to prepare in the range of a week. But as I said, if you were having these types of foods at the family meal, it would be very simple just to prepare enough for the meal or enough for the week, whichever you prefer. Any of you who have children or have had contact with young children in feeding them will realize that at about the age of, depending 4 to 6 months when the first teeth come through, the children have a great urge to chew. And this is the time in their development when they're ready to start chewing. And of course it's that time when they need to have some kind of food that they can chew on as well. Now what people most commonly resort to, of course, are teething biscuits. And these are good because they are very hard and they do serve the purpose for the children to chew on them. However, they do have a fair amount of sugar added to them, and so they are sweet. So there are a number of other things that you can substitute for teething biscuits, which would have less sugar in them. For example, you can give the child pieces of fruit. If you just take a piece of banana, give the child a piece of banana to chew on. Now this is quite soft, of course, so the child will get quite a bit of that to eat. With a piece of banana, or you can take an apple, and of course the child is not going to be able to hold on and chew a whole apple, so you might give the child a partial piece of apple, or you could cut the piece even smaller than that. Take out the pits and the seeds and things like that, and the child could chew away on a piece of apple, and this would be quite good and quite cool for the gums, I might add, for the young child. So giving the child a piece of apple would be useful. The other thing you can do is give the children pieces of vegetable. Now this is just a small piece of cooked carrot. You might use green beans, a small piece of turnip, depending on what you have. Carrot is probably going to be the one that's most commonly available, so a piece of cooked carrot for the child to chew on. Or if the child is really just looking for something for its gums, you might use it raw. When it's cooked, they are going to get some small pieces off the carrot. Probably the thing that's hardest and that the child would chew on for the longest period of time would be a piece of hard bread. And this is very common to us here. So if you have hard bread at home that you're going to be using for making brews, this is quite useful for your child. Be sure, if the child is chewing on this, that there aren't loose pieces on it. So just feel it with your own hands to be sure that it is fairly solid. And the child can chew away for quite a long period of time on a piece of hard bread. Another thing that they might use would be a plain soda cracker. Again, this would be soft enough that they would chew off the pieces on this and it would soften in their mouth. Of course, you can buy salted and unsalted soda crackers, so be sure that you're getting the unsalted variety of soda cracker. Or a piece of toast. if in the morning you're having breakfast and the child is looking for something to chew on, just take a piece of toast that's a bit dry and give the child a piece and they can chew on that. The sugar content in these types of foods are much lower than in the teething biscuits. So as a substitute, there are things that you can use other than the teething biscuits.